I never planned to marry in my 20s, but inventing a wealthy husband was my strongest shield against a toxic workplace. The lie worked flawlessly for 2 years until the luxury goods I casually demanded were delivered to my desk. I had no idea my innocent deception had activated a fierce underground campaign. My fictional husband was stepping out of the shadows to deliver a harsh sentence to the people trying to destroy me. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. I am Lillian Moore, and until recently, my life was a carefully constructed fortress of fabrications. Vanguard Nexus was supposed to be a stepping stone in my career, a digital technology firm with sleek glass walls and a supposedly progressive culture. In reality, it was a shark tank illuminated by soul-sucking fluorescent lights. The air always smelled faintly of stale coffee and desperation. Navigating the open-plan office meant dodging two distinct types of predators. The first was Derek, my mid-level manager. Derek had a habit of standing just a few inches too close, his cologne suffocating, always finding pathetic excuses to place a clammy hand on my shoulder while discussing quarterly projections. The second predator was Chloe. Chloe sat one desk over, armed with a saccharine smile and a tongue sharp enough to cut glass. She was the kind of coworker who would steal your ideas in a morning meeting and then compliment your blouse in the afternoon. I needed armor. Human resources was a joke, more interested in protecting the company from lawsuits than protecting employees from harassment. So, I invented Marcus. Marcus was a masterpiece of corporate deterrence. According to the lore I carefully dripped into office conversations. He was a senior cybersecurity consultant. He was brilliantly successful, fiercely protective, and just a little bit controlling. I planted seeds about how he insisted on reviewing my schedule, how he hated when other men texted me after hours, and how he tracked my location for safety reasons. It worked like a charm. Derek immediately backed off, intimidated by the prospect of a wealthy tech husband who might hack his life. Chloe stopped trying to invite me to sleazy networking mixers. The fiction held up perfectly for 2 solid years. I was safe. Then came the lunch break on a Tuesday afternoon. Chloe had insisted we walk to the high-end shopping district just a few blocks away. She dragged me into a glaringly bright designer boutique, the kind where the price tags are hidden and the sales associates look at you like you are a trespasser. Chloe immediately gravitated toward a display case holding a limited edition leather handbag. It was absurdly expensive, costing roughly 3 months of my rent. "You have to get this, Lillian," Chloe purred, holding the bag up to the light. "Your tech genius husband makes more than enough. Treat yourself." I forced a polite laugh, shaking my head. "It is beautiful, Chloe, but you know Marcus, he prefers quiet luxury. He would find this a little too flashy. Besides, he likes to be the one to buy me gifts." It was a perfect lie. At least, I thought it was. Wednesday morning, I arrived at Vanguard Nexus at 8:45. There, sitting dead center on my pristine white desk, was the massive, matte black shopping bag from the boutique. My heart slammed against my ribs. I approached my desk as if a bomb was resting on it. Inside the bag was the exact limited edition handbag from yesterday. Nestled against the expensive leather was a thick, cream-colored card made of heavy cardstock. I picked it up with trembling fingers. The handwriting was sharp, elegant, and entirely unfamiliar. It read, "To my loving wife, there is nothing you do not deserve, Marcus." Chloe practically materialized over my shoulder. Her eyes locked onto the bag, and I watched the mask of her sweet smile crack, revealing a raw, ugly layer of pure jealousy. "Wow," she muttered, her voice tight. "I guess Marcus changed his mind about flashy things." Cold sweat prickled at the back of my neck. My mind was screaming. Who bought this? Who was listening to us in that store? I forced the brightest, most nauseatingly happy smile I could muster. "He always loves to surprise me," I lied smoothly, fighting the urge to vomit. I played the role of the spoiled, adored wife perfectly for the next 2 hours, parading the bag around the office to maintain the facade in front of dozens of coworkers. If I showed even an ounce of fear, the wolves would tear me apart. But the moment I had an excuse, I locked myself in a bathroom stall and dialed the boutique. "I received a gift from your store," I told the associate, my voice hushed. "I need to know who purchased it. There has been a mistake." The voice on the other end was maddeningly polite. "I apologize, madam, but our client confidentiality protocols are absolute. Our security layer is impenetrable. We cannot disclose purchaser information under any circumstances." I hung up, staring at the bathroom tiles. I had made up a husband to protect myself, but someone entirely real had just taken his place. The handbag was merely the opening move in a terrifying escalation. By Friday of that same week, a bonded courier arrived at the Vanguard Nexus reception desk requiring my direct signature. He handed me a heavy midnight blue velvet box. Inside lay a flawless diamond tennis bracelet that caught and fractured the harsh fluorescent office light. The terrifying part was not the sheer value of the diamonds, but the sickening context attached to them. Just 2 days prior, while standing by the break room coffee machine, I had made a throwaway joke to a junior developer about how the gloomy autumn weather required something sparkling to lift my seasonal depression. The phantom listening to my life had taken meticulous notes. I realized with absolute horror that someone was monitoring my every move, eavesdropping on my most trivial office banter. My apartment suddenly felt like a fishbowl. I started checking my smoke detectors for hidden cameras and kept my blinds tightly drawn. The absolute breaking point arrived precisely 1 week later, on a Tuesday morning. A sharply dressed representative from an elite auto dealership walked into our lobby. He bypassed the reception desk entirely, approached me with a chilling certainty, and handed me a set of heavy, silver keys. A brand new, custom-ordered sports car was currently parked in my designated employee spot in the underground garage. The representative handed me a glossy leather folder containing a vehicle lease agreement, fully prepaid for 24 months, the signature at the bottom, penned in bold, arrogant strokes, read Marcus Moore. While my paranoia reached a boiling point, Chloe underwent a dangerous transformation. She was no longer just a jealous coworker. She had become a predatory investigator. She smelled blood in the water. The sheer volume of wealth dropping onto my desk had shattered my carefully curated illusion of a quiet, unassuming tech husband who hated flashiness. I caught her lingering near my desk after hours, her eyes darting over my paperwork. I saw her interrogating the front desk security guards about the courier logs and demanding to see the delivery manifests. While hiding in a bathroom stall on Thursday afternoon, I overheard her whispering excitedly to Derek by the sinks outside. Her voice dripped with malicious glee as she laid out her venomous theory. She told Derek she was entirely convinced that Marcus did not exist. Instead, she argued with terrifying conviction that I was either funneling proprietary company code to our biggest competitor in exchange for luxury bribes, or I was moonlighting as a high-end escort for wealthy corporate executives. I listened, paralyzed by fear, as she detailed her plan to meticulously gather this supposed evidence. She intended to present a formal, devastating case to the board of directors, aiming to have me terminated immediately and criminally investigated for corporate espionage. My life was spiraling into a terrifying abyss. I was trapped in a tightening vice between an invisible, immensely wealthy stalker and a vicious colleague determined to destroy my career and reputation. The panic became suffocating. I realized I could not handle this nightmare alone. Feeling my safety and my honor were in imminent peril, I made a desperate decision. I gathered every single piece of evidence tying me to this phantom. I packed the boutique card, the jewelry certificate of authenticity, and the 2-year prepaid lease agreement into a thick manila folder. During my lunch hour on Friday, I fled the office, practically running down the block, and walked straight into the Central Police Precinct downtown. I planned to report a severe case of stalking and formally surrender the unexplained assets to the authorities. The chaotic energy of the precinct lobby offered a strange, fleeting comfort. I approached the intake desk, my hands visibly shaking as I tried to explain the bizarre situation to a tired-looking desk sergeant. I slid the manila folder across the scratched glass partition. He opened it, casually glancing at the lease agreement and the total monetary value printed on the jewelry certificate. His bored expression vanished instantly, the color drained from his face. He did not ask me to fill out a standard incident report. He did not ask for my identification. Instead, he snatched the folder, picked up a solid red phone resting on his desk, and muttered a few urgent words I could not decipher. Within seconds, 2 uniformed officers appeared from a restricted side corridor. They did not guide me to a standard detective cubicle. They positioned themselves on either side of me and escorted me past the holding cells, down a stark, windowless hallway, and ushered me into a room at the very back of the building. The heavy steel door clicked shut behind me, plunging the space into absolute, deafening silence. It was a fully soundproof interrogation room, devoid of mirrors or windows. I sat at the cold, bolted-down metal table for exactly 45 minutes. My mind raced through every horrifying, apocalyptic scenario. Finally, the heavy door swung open. A tall man stepped into the room. He wore a sharply tailored dark suit that screamed authority and danger. His eyes were cold, calculating, and piercingly sharp, locking onto me like a predator assessing its prey. He held my manila folder in his hand. He did not pull up a chair. He did not introduce himself. He tossed the folder onto the metal table with a sharp, echoing slap. He leaned forward, planting his large hands flat on the metal surface, and looked dead into my eyes. "Hello, dear wife," he said, his voice a low, freezing baritone. "You are currently ruining a national-level federal operation." The freezing baritone of his voice hung in the dead air of the interrogation room. I sat frozen, my mind struggling to process the sheer absurdity of his statement. A national-level federal operation? I was a mid-level data analyst who had lied about being married to avoid awkward office parties. The man reached inside his tailored jacket and produced a heavy leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gold shield and a federal identification card. "I am Special Agent Nolan Hayes," he stated, his tone devoid of any warmth. "For the past 18 months, my task force has been quietly dismantling a sophisticated corporate espionage and embezzlement syndicate operating across the eastern seaboard. Vanguard Nexus is not just a technology firm. Lillian, it is the central nervous system of a massive criminal enterprise." I stared at the gold shield, my throat suddenly entirely dry. He pulled out a chair, scraping its metal legs against the concrete floor, and sat across from me. He opened my manila folder, pushing the car lease agreement aside with a flick of his finger. "You have been working under a monster," Nolan continued, leaning in. "Your manager, Derek, is not just a creepy middle manager with boundary issues. He is the principal architect of a phantom billing scheme that has siphoned over $40 million from your company defense contracts over the last 3 years. He manipulates the internal ledgers, creates dummy vendor accounts, and funnels the capital offshore." "And Chloe?" I managed to whisper, my voice cracking under the weight of the revelation. Nolan gave a grim, humorless smile. "Chloe is his primary cleaner. She is a highly efficient money launderer. She uses a network of high-end luxury retailers to wash the stolen funds. She buys limited edition items, offshore real estate, and zero-trace bearer bonds, converting dirty digital currency into untraceable physical assets. That is why she was constantly analyzing your clothes, your bags, your spending habits. She was trying to figure out if you were a rival player stepping on her turf." My stomach plummeted. The toxic office politics I thought I was navigating were actually the daily operations of a ruthless criminal syndicate. "But what does my fake husband have to do with any of this?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. "I made Marcus up. He is a ghost." Nolan exhaled a sharp breath, running a hand over his jaw. "That is where you threw a massive wrench into a multi-agency operation. 6 months ago, my team constructed a highly classified, deep-cover alias. We needed an entry point into Derek and his inner circle. We created a profile for a high net worth, morally flexible cybersecurity consultant who could theoretically help Derek bypass the new federal firewall systems. We gave this phantom a name, a digital footprint, and a legendary reputation in the dark web. He paused, locking his piercing eyes with mine. The name we chose for that alias was Marcus. We were 2 weeks away from having our undercover asset approach Derek, and then our wiretaps picked up audio of you, sitting in the company break room, bragging to your coworkers about your fiercely protective, hyper-successful cybersecurity husband named Marcus. The room started to spin. The statistical impossibility of the coincidence felt like a physical blow. Derek is paranoid, Nolan explained, his voice accelerating. When he heard you talking about Marcus, he panicked. He thought his network had already been breached. He put you under intense surveillance. We had to act immediately to maintain the integrity of our 6-month buildup. We had to prove to Derek that your Marcus and our Marcus were the exact same person, a real, tangible entity with vast resources. The gifts, I gasped, the realization hitting me like a freight train. Taxpayer dollars at work, Nolan confirmed flatly. The designer bag, the diamond bracelet, the 2-year prepaid lease on the sports car, all authorized federal bait. We used your innocent, desperate lie as a Trojan horse. We needed to legitimize my cover identity as your wealthy, controlling husband so Derek would eventually approach me to launder his stolen millions. Silence settled over the metal table. I looked at the man who had hijacked my fictional life. So, what happens now? I asked. I brought the evidence here. I am out. I want to resign tomorrow. Nolan slammed his hand on the table, the sharp noise making me flinch. You cannot resign. Lillian, if you suddenly disappear, or if you change your story, Derek will know you are compromised. He is ruthless. He will not simply fire you. He will ensure you have a fatal accident on your way home, or worse. Chloe will frame you for the entire $40 million deficit, and you will spend the next 30 years in a federal penitentiary. Tears of sheer frustration pricked my eyes. You are trapping me. I am offering you a lifeline, Nolan countered, his voice dropping to an intense, commanding whisper. You are already standing in the middle of a minefield. I need you to keep walking. I need you to return to Vanguard Nexus on Monday morning and continue playing the role of the spoiled, adored wife. You will introduce me to Derek as your husband. You will be my anchor inside the building. He slid a thick, intimidating legal document across the table. It was stamped with red classified seals. This is an operational immunity and protection contract, Nolan stated. If you cooperate, the United States government will guarantee your absolute safety. We will have tactical teams monitoring you 24 hours a day. When we finally drop the net on Derek and Chloe, you will walk away completely clean, with a spotless record and a very generous relocation package. If you refuse, you walk out of this precinct alone, and I cannot protect you from what Derek will do when he realizes you are a liability. It was the ultimate double-edged sword. I was being asked to return to the Shark Tank, but this time, covered in blood, acting as the bait for a federal strike team. I looked down at the contract, then back up at Nolan Hayes. He was terrifying, but he was also my only shield against a much darker reality. With a trembling hand, I picked up the black ink pen resting beside the folder. I pressed the tip to the paper and signed my name on the dotted line. I had just officially chained myself to a federal agent, stepping into a two-faced psychological war zone right at my very own desk. The following Monday morning arrived with the suffocating weight of an execution date. Exactly at 8:45, a sleek black town car pulled up to the main glass entrance of Vanguard Nexus. Nolan Hayes stepped out first. He was no longer the imposing federal agent in a stark interrogation room. He was wearing a custom Italian suit that radiated aggressive wealth. He opened my door, took my hand, and walked me straight into the main lobby. The entire ground floor seemed to hold its breath as we passed the security gates. Derek was standing by the reception desk, clutching his morning coffee. I watched his eyes dart over Nolan, calculating the cost of the suit, the watch, and the car waiting outside. Nolan played his part flawlessly. He wrapped a possessive arm around my waist, leaned in, and introduced himself to my manager. I could see the exact moment Derek's initial intimidation morphed into naked, ravenous greed. Derek saw a high-net-worth cybersecurity consultant with flexible morals. He saw a golden goose that could potentially help him wash his stolen millions faster and cleaner than ever before. Derek practically bowed, offering to take Nolan to an expensive steakhouse lunch later that week to discuss potential corporate synergies. Nolan smiled a cold, practiced smile and agreed, his eyes betraying absolutely nothing. As Nolan walked away, Derek stared after him like a starving dog looking at a fresh piece of meat. Derek believed he was the smartest man in the room, completely unaware that he was eagerly inviting a federal agent into his inner sanctum. However, while Derek was blinded by his own ambition, Chloe was operating on pure, venomous instinct. She watched the interaction from the elevator banks, her eyes narrowed into sharp slits. Despite Nolan's perfect performance, Chloe sensed a microscopic shift in my demeanor. I was too stiff. My smiles did not reach my eyes. The organic fear I used to harbor toward her had been replaced by a rigid, terrified anticipation. Chloe was a predator who survived by recognizing when the office ecosystem changed. She decided I was no longer just an annoying coworker hoarding a rich husband. She decided I was an active threat, a loose end that needed to be severed immediately. That afternoon, the real nightmare began. Chloe did not just want me fired. She wanted me annihilated. Using her high-level administrative access to the company mainframe, she initiated a devastatingly precise digital assassination. She bypassed the standard security protocols with the ease of a seasoned corporate hacker. She did not just create fake documents. She altered the metadata of the entire financial database to make it appear as if I had been the one overriding the security warnings for the past year and a half. She began weaving my digital footprint into the very fabric of Derek's embezzlement scheme. First, she targeted the ghost contracts. These were the fake vendor agreements Derek used to bleed the company dry. Chloe meticulously forged my electronic signature on a dozen of these documents, backdating them over the past 18 months. She manipulated the internal email servers, creating a fake trail of correspondence where I allegedly demanded expedited payments to these shell corporations. Every keystroke was designed to make me look like the criminal mastermind. Then came the financial kill shot. Chloe and Derek worked in tandem to set up an offshore banking account under my name. They used the personal information from my employment file to bypass the initial banking verification checks. Once the account was active, they routed exactly $2.5 million of stolen company funds directly into it. The transaction was deliberately coded as a consulting fee for a phantom software integration project. It was a massive, glaring red flag, a sum large enough to trigger automatic corporate alerts. Derek fully endorsed this strategy. He knew his operation was getting reckless, and that external auditors were starting to ask difficult questions. He needed a perfect scapegoat to take the fall when the authorities inevitably came knocking. I was the ideal sacrificial lamb. With the digital trap set, Chloe launched her psychological warfare. She was a master of the corporate whisper network. By Wednesday morning, the atmosphere in the office had turned violently toxic. Chloe began planting poisonous seeds during coffee breaks and in the women's restroom. She leaned in close to the junior staff, whispering with fake concern that my sudden influx of luxury goods was not from a rich husband at all. She claimed Marcus was just a convenient cover story I invented to explain away the massive amounts of money I was stealing from Vanguard Nexus. She hinted that the diamond bracelet and the sports car were purchased with the bonus funds of the hard-working employees around us. The rumor spread like wildfire. By Thursday, no one would look me in the eye. When I walked into the break room, the chatter stopped instantly, replaced by a heavy, accusing silence. People I had trained, colleagues I had shared lunches with, now stared at me with pure disgust. They saw a thief who was arrogantly flaunting stolen wealth right in front of their faces. The isolation was absolute and suffocating. I received no more friendly emails, no more casual invites to grab a sandwich downstairs. Chloe played the role of the heartbroken colleague to perfection, sighing loudly and telling everyone how disappointed she was that someone she trusted could betray the company so deeply. I sat at my desk, completely isolated, staring at my computer screen. I knew exactly what they were doing, but I was strictly ordered by Nolan to do absolutely nothing. I had to let them build their fake case. Chloe's forged dossier was a masterpiece of corporate sabotage. It was tight, logical, and backed by hard system data. To any internal auditor, the evidence was 99% conclusive. Every fake email, every forged signature, and the damning bank transfer all pointed a giant neon arrow directly at my head. Derek and Chloe had built a perfect cage around me, locking the door and throwing away the key. They were absolutely confident that I was going down, and I had to sit there in agonizing silence and wait for the axe to fall. The execution arrived precisely at 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon, an emergency. Mandatory all-hands meeting was broadcast over the public address system. The venue was not our usual casual briefing area, but the main executive boardroom on the top floor. A massive space dominated by a long mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling glass windows that made you feel like you were suspended in midair. I walked out of the elevator to find the entire department already assembled. Over 80 people were crammed into the room, standing shoulder to shoulder against the walls. The executive board members were seated rigidly at the head of the table, their faces carved from stone. The atmosphere was so dense with hostility, it felt difficult to pull air into my lungs. This was not a meeting, it was a public tribunal, and I was the sole defendant. Derek stood at the front of the room, adjusting his tie with an air of somber authority. Behind him, a massive digital projector screen illuminated the dim room with stark white light. As I was ushered to the very center of the space, left completely exposed with nowhere to sit and nowhere to hide, Derek cleared his throat. He did not look at me. He looked directly at the chief executive officer. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, and fellow colleagues," Derek began, his voice echoing with practiced gravity. "It is with profound regret that I called you all here today. Over the past 72 hours, our internal security and accounting teams have uncovered a catastrophic breach of trust. We have identified a systematic, highly sophisticated embezzlement operation draining our defense contract revenue." He clicked a small remote. The screen flashed, displaying a massive spreadsheet. My name, Lillian Moore, was printed in bold red letters at the very top. Derek paced slowly, pointing at the screen like a professor dissecting a corpse. "We are looking at unauthorized wire transfers, fraudulent vendor approvals, and the deliberate manipulation of our security protocols. The total missing capital amounts to exactly $2.5 million, and every single digital fingerprint leads back to one desk, Lillian's desk." He clicked the remote again. The screen changed to show the forged offshore bank account documents, followed by screenshots of the fake internal emails Chloe had fabricated. Derek read the emails aloud, his voice dripping with venom. He read the words Chloe had written, words demanding expedited payments to ghost companies, words threatening junior accountants if they delayed the transfers. It was a masterpiece of character assassination. He painted me as a ruthless, greedy manipulator who had been bleeding the company dry for 18 months. Then, it was Chloe's turn. She stepped out from the crowd, clutching a thick binder of printed reports to her chest. Her performance was terrifyingly flawless. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her lower lip trembled perfectly. She looked around the room, making eye contact with the junior staff, projecting the image of a deeply traumatized victim. "I cannot believe it," Chloe sobbed, her voice breaking dramatically. "Lillian was my friend. We ate lunch together. I trusted her. When I first noticed the accounting discrepancies on Tuesday morning, I prayed it was a system error. I spent 2 nights awake, digging through the ledgers, hoping to prove her innocence. But the deeper I looked, the worse it got." She turned to face me, tears spilling down her cheeks. The sheer malice hiding behind her weeping eyes was chilling. "You used us. Lillian," Chloe cried out, her voice echoing off the glass walls. You used that fake story about a rich husband to explain away the designer clothes, the diamond jewelry, the sports car. You were flaunting the money you stole from our bonuses, from our hard work, right in front of our faces. You need to be fired immediately. The board needs to hand her over to the federal authorities right this second. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The heavy silence shattered into a barrage of vicious whispers. I looked around desperately. I saw the faces of interns I had mentored, developers I had covered for when they were sick, all staring at me with absolute revulsion. I heard them muttering words like thief, parasite, and liar. I was completely surrounded by a wall of hatred. "That is a lie!" I finally screamed, my voice raw and echoing in the large space. I stepped forward, pointing a trembling finger at Derek and Chloe. "They are framing me! I have never touched those accounts. My computer can prove it. If you just let me log into my terminal and show you the access logs, you will see my credentials were hijacked." I turned toward the board members, pleading with my eyes. "Please, just let me access my workstation." Derek let out a short, patronizing sigh. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black security token. "I am afraid that is impossible. Lillian, as of 1 o'clock today, your administrative privileges have been permanently revoked. Your terminal is locked. Your corporate phone is wiped. We cannot risk you destroying any more evidence to cover your tracks." My heart stopped. My blood ran completely cold. I was entirely cut off. The digital alibi I desperately needed was trapped behind a firewall I could no longer breach. I was a soldier on a battlefield who had just been stripped of all her armor and weapons. Derek turned his back to me, dismissing my existence entirely. He pulled his smartphone from his jacket pocket. The smirk on his face was no longer hidden. It was a wide, triumphant grin of a predator that had successfully cornered its prey. He tapped the screen with deliberate, exaggerated motions. "I have heard enough," Derek announced to the boardroom. "This is no longer an internal human resources matter. This is a severe criminal offense." He placed the phone to his ear. I stood frozen in the center of the room, my breathing shallow and erratic. The walls felt like they were shrinking, closing in to crush me. I watched Derek's lips move as he calmly identified himself to the dispatcher. I listened as he formally requested an immediate dispatch of the Economic Crimes Division to the Vanguard Nexus headquarters to arrest an employee for grand larceny. The trap had snapped entirely shut, its steel teeth biting deep into the bone. I was utterly destroyed, completely isolated, and waiting for the police sirens to sing the end of my life. Derek barely had time to lower the phone from his ear before the heavy, solid oak doors of the executive boardroom violently burst open. They did not just swing wide, they crashed against the walls with a thunderous impact that shook the glass panes. The entire room jumped in collective shock. A squad of heavily armed officers flooded the space, their tactical gear a stark contrast to the tailored corporate suits around the table. But the man leading the charge was not a standard economic crimes detective. It was Nolan Hayes. He strode into the center of the room, looking like an apex predator. He wore a razor-sharp black suit, his expression cold and completely merciless. He did not look at me. He walked straight toward the front of the room, raising a gleaming gold shield high in the air for the entire board of directors to see. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." Nolan's voice boomed, completely dominating the massive room. "Nobody move a single muscle." The silence that crashed down over the 80 people in the room was absolute. It was the kind of dead, breathless quiet that follows a bomb detonation. Derek froze, his smug grin melting off his face like wax. Chloe dropped her thick binder of forged documents, the papers scattering across the expensive mahogany table. Nolan turned to face the crowd, his piercing gaze locking onto Derek. "My name is Special Agent Nolan Hayes. I am not a cybersecurity consultant. I am the lead investigator of a federal task force that has been monitoring the criminal activities within Vanguard Nexus for the past 6 months." He reached into his jacket, pulled out an encrypted flash drive, and tossed it to one of the tactical officers standing near the projector terminal. Within seconds, the screen behind Derek flickered and changed. The fake spreadsheets and forged emails vanished. In their place, lines of raw, unedited server data began scrolling rapidly. "What you were just shown was a meticulously constructed fairy tale," Nolan stated, his tone dripping with lethal authority. "We have the original server logs, the decrypted network access traces, and the raw acoustic metadata. They prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Lillian Moore's administrative credentials were stolen and remotely operated from the terminal belonging to Chloe." Nolan signaled the officer again. An audio file began playing over the boardroom speakers. It was crisp and clear. It was the sound of Chloe and Derek whispering by the sinks outside the bathroom just a week prior. The entire company listened as Chloe gleefully detailed her exact plan to frame me, to forge my signature, and to use me as a human shield. Chloe's face drained of all color. The sweet, heartbroken victim act shattered into a million pieces. She looked around like a trapped rat, her breathing turning into panicked gasps. "But what about the money?" one of the board members stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "The $2.5 million transferred to her account?" Nolan offered a chilling, satisfied smile. He stepped closer to Derek, who was now sweating profusely, his hands trembling at his sides. "That was my favorite part of their sloppy operation," Nolan replied smoothly. "When Chloe initiated that wire transfer into the offshore account set up under Lillian's name, my cyber division was already waiting inside the banking portal. We intercepted the routing numbers in real time. We did not freeze the funds, we simply redirected them." Nolan leaned in, his voice dropping to a deadly register. "Those $2.5 million never touched any account associated with Lillian. We funneled every single penny directly into the anonymous black funds in the Cayman Islands controlled exclusively by you. Derek, you practically handed us the final piece of physical evidence we needed to tie you to the entire $40 million deficit." Derek collapsed into the chair behind him. His eyes were wide and vacant. The realization that he had walked blindly into a federal trap completely broke his mind. He had nothing left to say. But Chloe did not surrender quietly. The second she realized her perfect life was over, she snapped. She let out a piercing, hysterical scream that echoed off the glass walls. She lunged at Derek, her hands clawing wildly at his suit jacket. "It was his idea!" Chloe shrieked, her voice completely unhinged. "He made me do it! He told me to forge the signatures! He threatened to ruin my career if I did not wash the money. I am a victim! You have to arrest him, not me!" It was a pathetic, ugly display of cowardice. The board members watched in absolute disgust as the woman who had just faked tears to destroy my life was now viciously tearing her own partner apart to save herself. Nolan gave a slight nod. Two tactical officers stepped forward. The sharp, cold, metallic click of handcuffs snapping around their wrists echoed through the room. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Derek was hauled out of his chair, completely limp and defeated. Chloe was dragged toward the exit, still thrashing and screaming her vile accusations. They were marched out of the boardroom in supreme disgrace, paraded past the dozens of coworkers they had manipulated. Their careers, their stolen wealth, and their freedom were permanently extinguished. Exactly 1 month later, the atmosphere at Vanguard Nexus was entirely different. The federal sweep had purged the entire executive suite and the middle management layer. The suffocating toxicity was gone, replaced by a cautious but genuine sense of relief. I sat at my desk, finally free from the shadow of fear and paranoia. I looked up as a familiar figure walked through the office doors. Nolan Hayes was not wearing a flashy Italian suit or a tactical vest. He was dressed in a simple casual jacket and jeans. He walked over to my desk, his eyes warm and completely devoid of the calculating edge I had seen in the interrogation room. The federal agency had offered me a massive financial reward for my role in the operation, along with the option to keep the designer bags and the sports car as compensation for my trauma. I had refused all of it. I wanted no part of the fake, stolen luxury that had nearly ruined my life. I only kept my job and my cleared name. Nolan stopped at the edge of my desk. He did not say a word about cybersecurity or federal operations. He simply smiled, a genuine, gentle expression that reached his eyes. "So," Nolan said softly, his baritone voice warm and inviting, "I was wondering if a brilliant data analyst might be interested in getting dinner tonight. A real dinner. No fake names, no federal covers, just absolute honesty." I looked at the man who had turned my biggest lie into my greatest salvation. I felt a genuine, light-hearted smile spread across my face. I closed my laptop, stood up, and told him that a real date sounded absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Violet Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.